Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've turned on the news, survived a recent election cycle, or even just shopped for a car, you have definitely heard the Made in America pitch. We literally hear it everywhere. But today, we're going to tune out the political rhetoric and look strictly at what the data actually says is happening beneath the surface. We're going to dig into why manufacturing left in the first place and figure out whether this current hype about a domestic industrial revival is actually built on solid ground.
So let's just cut straight to the chase and ask the big question. Can those lost factories and blue-collar jobs truly come roaring back to the U.S.? It's the question that's defined American economic policy for decades, right? But to answer it accurately, we really need to separate our historical nostalgia for American industry from the actual modern realities of global supply chains.
Part 1. The nostalgia versus the data.
To figure out where we're going, we first have to look at the sheer numbers behind all that national nostalgia. And honestly, it is a pretty stark reality. Manufacturing jobs plummeted by nearly 5 million over just 2 decades. Back in 1998, 11% of the total American workforce was on a factory floor. By 2018, that was nearly sliced in half to just 6.7%. And alongside that, we saw a roughly 25% drop in physical manufacturing plants. This shift fundamentally altered the economic landscape and absolutely devastated once vibrant communities as production shifted overseas.
But right here is the core paradox of that whole era. If you look at this, the yellow line up top shows the manufacturing employment share dropping steadily for over 70 years. But check out that blue dotted line right beneath it. It proves that our actual output, the real value added per worker, climbed steadily the entire time. We were bleeding workers, sure, but the ones who stayed on the line were becoming exponentially more productive. So it tells us the story is way more complex than just, factories closing. Section 2. Automation and the China shock.
Those millions of jobs didn't just vanish by accident. They were hit by twin shocks. The first of these forces was what economists call the China shock. This was a massive, unprecedented wave of globalized imports after China integrated into the global trading system. The data shows this specific shock directly wiped out nearly 60% of manufacturing jobs during that period. And the real tragedy for those towns was that workers didn't just seamlessly transition to other industries. Nope, those job losses converted almost one-for-one into long-term unemployment.
You can actually see it happening right here. Look at that red line representing Chinese import penetration. It just skyrockets right after the year 2000. It completely breaks away from previous historical trends, fundamentally altering global supply chains and hitting domestic producers with a level of import competition they absolutely weren't prepared for.
But we need to bust a major myth here. The popular narrative says that foreign trade alone stole every single one of those jobs. The reality, however, an immense information and tech revolution was transforming the factory floor at the exact same time. The introduction of computer-aided design, advanced robotics, and routine automation replaced millions of human hands. Because, well, turns out robotic arms don't need coffee breaks and they don't demand overtime pay. So we didn't just offshore jobs, we literally engineered many of them out of existence.
Section 3. A Made in America revival?
Flash forward to today, and things are getting wild. After decades of decline, recent supply chain nightmares and geopolitical tensions have sparked a massive pivot. Which brings us to this truly staggering number. Construction spending on new manufacturing facilities has absolutely exploded by 183% since 2020. Driven by major government incentives and corporate strategies to de-risk, hundreds of billions of dollars are just pouring into domestic industrial construction right now.
And it's not just construction. Consumer habits are shifting too. Take a look at the U.S. Self-Sufficiency Index, which basically measures Americans buying domestic goods relative to imports. It actually reversed a long downward trend, growing by 5% between 2022 and 2023. This is a big deal because it indicates a genuine, measurable pivot toward a Made in America for America economy.
What this means on the ground is that companies are actively scrambling to diversify. They are slashing imports from Asian low-cost countries by the billions. Just look at these figures. Overall imports from these 14 nations dropped by $143 billion in 2023. Chinese imports alone plummeted by $105 billion. This was largely driven by steep declines in things like computers, electronics, and chemicals. So the shift is undeniably happening.
Section 4. The reshoring roadblocks. Time for a quick reality check, though, because simply willing entire industries back to America faces some massive structural roadblocks. Apple CEO Tim Cook actually hit the nail on the head here. He noted that you couldn't even fill a room with U.S. tooling engineers. You'd be lucky to fill a small closet. One of the biggest hurdles we face isn't a lack of cash. It's a severe lack of the skilled labor required to operate complex, advanced manufacturing. The expertise just isn't concentrated here the way it is in other parts of the world right now. To put a number on that skills gap, researchers project we could be looking at 1.9 million unfilled manufacturing jobs by 2033. Literally, millions of jobs with no one qualified to do them. So for anyone deciding what to study right now, take note. You can build the most advanced, multi-billion-dollar semiconductor fab on the planet, but if you don't have the specialized technicians to run it, that investment is going nowhere.
Plus, it's like a giant, deeply integrated puzzle. You can't just pick up a single factory and move it across the ocean. You have to move the entire supply chain. Right now, only 5% of manufacturing executives say they can source all their raw materials locally. To truly reshore something like batteries or electronics, you have to secure the upstream critical minerals and the downstream assembly. Factor in the immense capital costs and the constant policy whiplash over tariffs, and you can see why a lot of corporations are hesitating.
And get this, forcing industries to come back home by government fiat can actually backfire. It sounds completely counterintuitive, but a recent OECD report found that forced reshoring created dangerous domestic bottlenecks. It actually made half of the assessed economies more fragile, not more resilient. Trying to produce absolutely everything inside your own borders just draws resources away from your natural competitive advantages.
Section 5. Strategic Reshoring and Friendshoring.
So if dragging 100% of production back isn't going to work, or isn't even a good idea, what is the realistic future of American manufacturing? Well, to make domestic manufacturing economically sustainable in a higher-cost market, companies really only have three strategic avenues. They can drastically cut labor costs through automation, they can pass the higher costs straight to you, the consumer, or they can invest heavily in highly innovative proprietary processes where the actual manufacturing cost is just a tiny piece of the pie.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, the reshored factory of the future isn't going to be packed with thousands of workers elbow to elbow on a crowded assembly line. As you can see, it's going to be spacious, clean, and rely heavily on capital-intensive automation and robotics. The jobs that do come back will be fewer, for sure, but they are going to require much higher technical skills.
And for the stuff we simply can't automate efficiently, or the raw materials we just don't possess, we're going to increasingly turn to a buzzword you'll be hearing a lot: friendshoring. Instead of trying to make everything inside U.S. borders, companies are building resilient ecosystems by relying on trusted trade partners, especially our North American allies like Mexico and Canada, to supply components and labor safely. So wrapping up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on. The next time you pick up a product labeled Made in the USA, recognize that the landscape has fundamentally shifted. The future of domestic manufacturing is not some nostalgic return to the 1970s. It's a highly automated, strategically friendshored, and incredibly advanced new era. The factories are coming back, but the nature of the work, that has changed forever. Thanks for hanging out with me, and keep questioning the data behind the headlines.